Hopefully it looks like I am live now. Wow, okay, that was an interesting way to start the morning, wasn't it? Monday morning fun, everyone. So, all right, my name is 𝘓𝘓𝘵𝘮. How are you? I am the Motivation Mama, and I am coming to you today to do Monday Magic webinars. These are webinars that I do every Monday morning to provide a little bit of motivation, or a lot of motivation, encouragement and inspiration for you on your week ahead, and also for life in general. So again, welcome to everyone who's watching on Instagram. Welcome to you who are watching on Facebook. We just had a bit of a glitch and I had to try and fix it up, but it's all happening now. So today's topic that I want to talk on is all about letting go of judgment, both from others and ourselves. It is a really interesting topic that I want to dive deep in today. So a first couple of questions that I want to ask you are, have you ever, and I'd love you, to answer these questions in the comments, wherever you're watching from, have you ever felt like someone was just judging you in something that you're doing in life, or in anything or everything, right? In life or in business or whatever. And then because of that perception of judgment that you've had, have you maybe changed direction in something that you were doing that really deep down in your heart, you knew that change of direction wasn't right? It's a really interesting question to answer if you really look deep into it, right? Because let me tell you, something that came up for me, and this was a good couple of years ago now before I went into business, as a born people pleaser, right? This is something that I have been born with. I like to please people, but as a born people pleaser, I have done this so often throughout my life, it is ridiculous, right? In fact, can I tell you that when I went into business, I very nearly changed my business name and the whole direction of my business simply because of what one person said to me. It was a judgment that they made, or let me rephrase that. It was a judgment that I perceived that they made. It was an interpretation that I made, right? I interpreted their reaction to my business name and what I wanted to do for business as something that they didn't think was a good idea. And because of that interpretation that I had, I nearly A, didn't go into business, and B, changed my business name. And now this is something that I love. This is my life. So I want to talk about letting go of that judgment today, right? And so when we let go of it, how we can actually, in ourselves, don't know what happened there. How we can, in ourselves, how we can let go of that judgment and have a really happy and fulfilling life ourselves, right? So let me tell you that taking judgment, there are two forms of judgment, right? And I've already kind of implied this in the title, okay? So the first form of judgment is that we are being judged by other people, right? That other people are judging us. The second form, and this is the really interesting one, is that often we are too afraid to look at, is that we are judging others. It's a little bit confronting when you think about that. But so two forms of judgment, right? Being judged and us judging other people. And both of these forms of judgment can actually be as equally damaging as each other. They can be damaging on our health, both our mental health and our physical health, if we let them. So we don't want to let them, right? To combat this, to turn it around, we need to let go of that judgment. And letting go of that judgment, it consists of letting go when we've been judged, right? So letting go of when we perceive people to be judging us. And I keep saying that word, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later. So letting go of when we perceive judgment from other people, and also letting go of our own judgmental thoughts. Two really important things to turn around to combat that judgment, right? And letting go of judgment, right? It is vital. It is absolutely vital to safeguard, as I said just now, our mental health and our physical health, which I'm going to talk about both today. So hands up, let me know in the comments or in the chats. Hands up, you know, have you ever felt judged by someone? And have you ever allowed that feeling to develop into a belief of not feeling good enough? I think that most likely all of us have done that. If we're honest with ourselves, all of us have done that in one, you know, in some way, shape or form throughout our lives. I know I have, right? And the thing here to do when this happens is it's not the thing to do, but what happens is we cling on to the memories of what people have said to us, right? We hold on to them. It's not healthy. And have you ever like replayed these things over and over and over in your mind, you know, and you just can't let go of these thoughts? And if you've gotten to that place, what actually happens is if you continue yourself to keep going and going and going, you actually, that can actually lead to anxiety and depression. And those of you who know my history, so I've been through, you know, several domestic violence, relationship, workplace bullying, sexual harassment, all of that stuff, you know, and I have allowed judgment, particularly from the most recent thing that I spoke about is, you know, the workplace bullying. I allowed a lot of judgment from others to allow me to lead into that anxiety and that depression, right? And we can allow it, and I have allowed it to kind of dampen my life light, you know, crush my self-esteem. We can allow it to crush our self-esteem, which is not what we want to do. Hi Lisa, how are you, darling? I think that's Lisa. Hello on Instagram. So if we still, you know, if we continue to allow that judgment to affect us, the judgment of others, we can start to distrust people. And distrusting, wow, that's, you know, that's pretty full on. We don't want to be in that place of not being able to trust anyone that comes into our lives, right? And this sounds really harsh, but if we let it go too far, if we let that judgment continue in our lives, hello Carolyn, beautiful lady, if we let it go too far in our lives, we can even start to hate. Sorry people on Instagram, something's happening on Instagram. I'm not sure what's happening, but that's all right. It keeps pausing. Apparently we're having technical issues today, but that's okay. We can start to hate those people. Hate, and I hate the word hate. I dislike the word hate. But if we let that judgment go too far, the hate feeling can set in, and that is really not a good place to be. So let's talk about now about what it means to let go of judgment. What does it mean to let go of that judgment, right? When we let go, and this is the really powerful part, is we get that power back in our lives. We let go of judgment and we start to feel freedom in our lives as well. It's amazing. So holding on to things that might have happened in our past, right, is exactly that. It's in the past. It's history. So when we are holding on to things that have happened from our past, right, it means that we're hanging on to things that can't be changed. These things are done. They're done and dusted. They can't be changed, right? So it's kind of like, what's the point of hanging on to it, right? Why? And, you know, question, why are we hanging on to it? Okay. And in the same vein, worrying about what the future means, you know, worrying about the future and the judgment of others in the future, and I have been very guilty of doing that, right, if we're worrying about the future, we're allowing something else that we, to a point, don't have any control over because it hasn't happened yet. Now, here's an interesting point to make here, though. We have control over our own lives, but we don't have control over the judgment of others, right? Or the judgments that other people, or the thoughts that other people might have about us. So that's what I mean, right? When I say worrying about the future, about something we can't control. We can't control other people, right? Because it hasn't happened yet. We can control our own thoughts, though. And when we worry about the future, or we worry about the past that can't be changed, it brings up feelings of worry, and anxiety, feelings of regret. Regret is a huge one when we look into the past, So when we place our focus back on to the present, put our focus back onto the now, it puts us in a much better place mentally, much better place to focus on the now. So did you know, here's a question for you, did you know that, when you hold on to that judgment, that rather than healing the pain that judgment might cause, you're actually, you're causing pain in your own life? Did you know that? You're not allowing yourself to heal. And you're creating a negative energy in your life, and even pain in your own life when you're hanging on to those thoughts, that negativity. And again, it's not a good place to be, is it? Right? When we do hold on to that judgment, and I've seen this happen many a times, and it's happened to me, and I'm guilty of it, right? It can kind of manifest from us as passive aggression. We might inadvertently say hurtful words to other people that, we might not necessarily mean to come out. But let's face it, it happens, it does, right? Or worse, rather than words, it can happen physically. We can get really physically angry. If we let that judgment stay in us, we can actually become, if we allow ourselves, we can become a bitter person. And nobody wants to be at that place of bitterness, right? I want to tell a story here. Within about kind of like the workplace situation that I was in the other day, a few years ago, right? Pain can manifest physically and mentally, right? And I want to talk about physically here. I've already mentioned it a bit, but this thing I want to talk about is when I was in this workplace situation, I have something called frozen shoulder. Now, if you haven't heard of it, it's a condition where your shoulders, I actually physically can barely lift my arms above my head. Anyway, it's a very painful condition. But what I noticed was that when I would think back on that situation, and there was a specific person who was very close to me that I perceived to be judging me, that I perceived, and I wasn't 100% sure. I was never said to me in person, but I believed they were saying awful things behind my back. And this was someone who was extremely close to me, right? So that was, I was believing in that judgment from this person. And what was happening is, as I was replaying these thoughts and what I thought they were saying to me over and over in my head, the pain in my shoulders would get so bad. And honestly, can I tell you, even as I'm talking about it now, I can feel the pain coming back, which means that, after this, I'm going to need to go and do a bit of release, and that's okay. But I could feel the pain in my shoulders getting worse and exacerbating. So what I did was I actually went ahead and I got some help for this situation, because I thought this isn't really healthy for me. So I went and hired a coach, and I also did some EFT tapping. I did those two things. And as I was working, and I was actually quite shocked, because as I was working on this situation mentally, in both aspects, I felt that I could physically feel the pain dissipating in my shoulders. as I was working on that healing towards that, the judgment that I was having of this other person and the judgment that I believed they were having towards me, as I was letting that go, the pain in my shoulders, it didn't totally go, but it certainly became less, if you like. There's a big word, but I can't think of the big word. So it was amazing to notice that, wow, okay, so that mental state that I was in was 100% affecting me physically, right? And now, and look, honestly, as I tell that story here, I just said I felt the pain in my shoulders, but as I said the words letting it go, the pain went. Isn't it amazing? Physical and mental, that is so connected, right? So it's really important that we understand the cycle of judgment, you know, whether we're judging someone or they're judging us, and the causes behind it as well, right? So that we can end the cycle for ourselves. So let's talk about some strategies on how we can release that judgment and how we can release that fear over the future that we might have because of that judgment, right? So the first one I want to talk about is mindfulness. Now, this might seem really simple, but it's effective. It's not as simple as it sounds, but it is bloody effective, right? So learning to become mindful of our own thoughts is absolutely crucial, right? When you are unaware of how your thoughts might be impacting on your emotions, on your bodily sensations, just as I was talking about, when you're not aware how, you know, your interactions might be affecting other people or how your interactions are with other people, it's really difficult to let go of any fearful thoughts that we might have. Okay? So when we stop and we really begin to mindfully and actively listen to the thoughts that are happening as they arise, right? We notice the thoughts that we're creating in our own mind, right? These thoughts are just that. They're thoughts, but they might not necessarily be facts. Does that make sense? So when I'm talking about this other person, you know, I perceived them to be saying things about me. I was assuming it, but was it a fact? I don't know. But that was the perception that I took from that, right? So the important thing to remember is that judgments are just that. They are judgments, right? They're not necessarily fact. So allow yourself to have thoughts like, you know, allow yourself to have thoughts where you don't act on them impulsively, right? I want you to stop. I want you to accept the thoughts that you're having in the moment. Accept them. That's okay. And let them go. And I say this a lot in my course, the Phoenix Method. I say a lot about letting your thoughts go. But it's not as easy as letting it go. You need to feel through the thoughts. Feel through the associated feelings that you're having to them, but not acting on those thoughts. That's the important thing to remember. Okay? Can you imagine, you know, and I think I asked this question before, imagine what would have happened if I had listened to one person about my business idea, and about my business name. One person. Can you imagine? I wouldn't be here doing this webinar today. Something that I love to do on a Monday morning. Because, you know, I wouldn't have allowed myself to feel through that thought. Pardon me. So the second thing we need to do is we need to reframe the judgment, right? And think of the possible consequences. So it's really important that we take a step back and we examine the real meaning behind those judgments, right? And think about what are the potential consequences. Now, when we think of consequences, right, we really got to make sure that we don't spiral, you know, into that catastrophic type thinking. That's not what we want to do. We don't want to spiral into that. But, you know, thinking about the possible consequences. And when we have these judgmental thoughts, right, they can often spring from that fear of what might happen, as I said, looking into the future, right? Or if you or someone else took or didn't take or hasn't taken a particular action. So think about that for a minute. But I want you to now try and think of what the real actual consequences are, right? Bring it back into reality. What are the real true consequences? And so rather than kind of, you know, listening to that judgment and having like a knee-jerk reaction, try and think it through first. Is it reality? Or is it just that? Is it a judgment? Is it a perceived judgment that we're perceiving? So to take that thought a little bit further, when someone says something to you that you might perceive to be hurtful, right? Think about, was that actually what they meant to say? So, and let me talk about here, I want to talk about the difference between kind of like messaging. You know, when we message someone and someone says something to you and you take it to be something hurtful, when actually, because you haven't been able to hear the way they have said that, they might have actually meant it quite sarcastically, right? And meant it to be a joke, but you have taken it as something offensive because that's the frame of mind that you happen to be in at that stage. Now, I know that has happened to me on a lot of occasions where, you know, I tend to be quite sarcastic sometimes, and I've sent what I thought was a funny comment, and the person on the other end who's read it has read it in a totally different context, and they have thought that it was me judging them, right? So when I say it again, when someone says something to you that you perceive to be hurtful, was that what they actually meant? Question it, ask them. If you're brave enough, ask them. And then on to the last point is think of judgment as gratitude. And when I say this, some people go, what? Gratitude? What? Yeah, absolutely. Think of how you might grow from what that other person has said, or how can you grow even from what you're saying to yourself? How can you take what someone else might have said to you and translate it into a positive way? So taking that a little bit further, maybe you can even take something that they have said to you and you can be grateful that they might have pointed something out to you that you can now work on. It's not always easy, believe me, but it's a really positive, powerful way to look at it. So, you know, like when we feel people might judge us by our mistakes. Now, and again, those of you who've watched me for a while will know I don't like the word mistake. Learning experience. Learning experience is exactly what I call them, right? So to give you an example, you might notice someone like developing a kind of a judgmental thought, right? Something like they're looking at a person and they're going, oh my God, this person has got their shit together. They've got it all together, right? And I am such a mess compared to her. Okay. I think that we have all said that, and it's a judgment that we have made at some stage in our mind. But instead, right, instead of allowing that process, that thought process to end there, let's take it a step further and let's reframe it. Let's go, oh, wow, she really seems to be looking after herself well. Wow, she's really got her stuff together, you know. She's really presented very well. I really admire the way she's presenting herself, and I would love to learn how to do that for myself. Do you see the difference? So we're kind of, it's almost like we're practicing gratitude for the way that person is showing up and the judgment that we're perceiving that, you know, they're, for want of a better way to put it, they're perfect or they've got their stuff together, right? We're turning it around and going, that's awesome. I'm really happy for her. How can I get to that place as well? So we've almost taken out the judgment and we're bringing in the gratitude that she has shown that to us, right? Does that make sense? I'm hoping that makes sense. Oh, so my beautiful people watching this, those are just a few things, and there's so many more I could talk about today, but these webinars only go for about 30 minutes. You know, and I talk about this topic, judgment and letting go of judgment and forgiveness. I talk about it a lot in my group coaching program, the Phoenix Method, and it's a powerful module that we do. It is absolutely powerful. I see healing from the ladies in this when we go through this one in particular. It's amazing. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and joining me today. Thank you for putting up with all the techie issues. It's always fun on a Monday morning. But I want to offer, I've got spaces for 5 people this week. I want to offer free 30-minute clarity calls. If you would like, you know, if you're feeling yourself in this space where, you know, you are doubting yourself, you're feeling like, you know, you need to be in that space of let go of that judgment and you're just needing a bit of you know, extra support, I'm opening up 5 spots to free 30-minute clarity calls this week only. The link is in the description on Facebook if you're watching on Facebook, and if you're watching on Instagram, link is in the bio, so you can go and click on free 30-minute clarity call there. All right, my beautiful people, thank you so much for joining me again for this week's Monday Magic. And I wish you a happy and healthy week ahead. And I will see you again next Monday. All right, everyone. Bye. Mwah.